evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is James Roberts. I am joined this evening by John Gauger. John, welcome.
Thank you, James.
This is the October 2nd edition of Effective, Efficient, Affordable, and above all, Accountable to You, the show that asks, how on earth are you supposed to get comfortable voting for or against a budget that you are not allowed to see? Yeah, we're going to talk about two issues this evening. We're not really going to get into the nitty-gritty of the budget. That'll wait for coming weeks. We are going to talk about what has been referred to in the press as the incentive housing scheme. Now, this is not the neighborhood revitalization thing that we have been talking about. This is something entirely different. And we will come back to that in the second half of the show. The first half of the show, we are going to focus on the events of last night, which was the Board of Selectmen's meeting and the town meeting at the Gilbert School. Before we dive into that, those of you who are watching this live, as they say on Charter, will already have figured out that our time slot has changed. If you're watching on the web and you ever want to watch us on Charter, our time slot will now be 6:30 to 7 on Wednesdays. So that is a slight change from where we used to be. But let's dive into the nitty-gritty of last night. Monday, October 1st, Board of Selectmen meeting, town meeting at the Gilbert School. We were both there. It was
incredible.
It was quite the meeting. It started badly. It started with a Board of Selectmen meeting at which quickly became transfixed by a very simple question. Did the prior Board of Selectmen meeting, the meeting of the 24th of September, actually adopt the budget that we were gathering at Gilbert School to vote on? Now, there's no question that the prior Board of Selectmen meeting didn't tell us what was in the budget. There was no presentation. There was no summary of the philosophy behind the budget. There was no summary of the spending in the budget. There was no summary of the tax in the budget. There was no summary of the mill rate that the budget would represent. That much is irrefutable, and no one has chosen to challenge. But the question is, did the Board of Selectmen actually even adopt the budget? Now, those of you who have listened to the soundtrack, you'll recall it was a short, bad-tempered meeting. But if you listen to that soundtrack, you will have heard a motion being made by George Clausen to accept the budget as put forward by the town manager. You will then have heard Selectman Perez make two separate amendments to that motion. And then you'll have heard them voting. Now, the general practice is when a motion is amended that you vote separately on the amendment and then you come back and you vote on the amended motion. Now, that never actually happened. They only took one vote, which again, per the general practice, would have been the vote on the amendment. They never actually voted on the motion. They moved on and set the date for the referendum.
Town meeting.
Town meeting, I beg your pardon. That at least is the view of Selectmen Fracasso and Albanesius. That's what they thought they were voting on. Interestingly enough, the minutes of the meeting state differently. Not only, again, in the view of Selectmen Fracasso and Albanesius, not only are the minutes imbalanced in the sense that they give word for word the discussions of one side of the table and omit any words from the other side of the table, but they also make clear, per the minutes, that the vote that was taken was an amalgamated vote on both the motion and the amendments. This is not how Fracasso and Albanesius remember the meeting. It's not, frankly, how the tape seems to read. So yesterday, 6 o'clock, Gilbert School, we had a little squabble about whether the minutes were correct and whether we actually had a budget that we could have a town meeting on. The town attorney was consulted, and in typically Delphic fashion, we pay our town attorney to be smart, and he was very smart last night. He said, on the basis that the minutes are correct, then a budget was adopted and the town meeting can proceed. Selectman Fracasso asked that he be allowed to, the town attorney, be allowed to listen to the tape. For whatever reason, the mayor was not real enthusiastic about that option, and that never happened. And so our town attorney said, assuming the minutes are correct, and I have no reason to know whether they are or they aren't, we're going to proceed, notwithstanding the fact that two selectmen actually voted against the minutes as being incorrect. So as I say, it was an inauspicious start to the meeting. We then morphed into the town meeting itself. And the town meeting, I think it would be fair to say, was consumed by two issues. The first is, given the fact that no one's actually seen a budget, can we have a town meeting? The second was that given no one's actually seen an audit, should we have a town meeting? Now, those of you who watched the show last week will know that I had gone into Town Hall on Wednesday and asked for a copy of the budget. You'll further know that I was told that there would be no copy of the budget until after Monday. The budget was not put on the web. No one was allowed to see the budget. It was one of the secrets that I referred to on last week's show. Now, lo and behold, Monday morning, printed copies of the budget appear, and the budget appears on the web. 8, 9, perhaps even as much as 10 hours before the town meeting. Now, the question is 10 hours enough time for everyone in town to understand that the budget is now mysteriously available, to read it, to review it, to come up with an informed decision so that they can attend the town meeting and have a view? After all, the town meeting is not a perfunctory thing. It is not a rubber stamp. Citizens are expected to show up, to have a view, to discuss, if need be, to amend. It's awfully difficult to amend a document that, as far as you know, doesn't exist, that is being kept secret from you, that you have never actually seen. So a motion was made at the town meeting to actually postpone the meeting so that people could go back and review the budget. Now, I don't know how you get comfortable voting on something that you've never actually seen. I don't know how you get comfortable voting on something that no one has ever told you what's in it, not even at a headline level, not even what's the total spending number, what's the total taxation number, what's the total mill rate number. Not even that. No one stood up at the town meeting to give those details. No one stood up to tell you on the town side what was in the budget. No one stood up to tell you on the school side what was in the budget. Board of Ed Chair Hofnagel actually did stand up and said point blank she was not going to give a presentation on what was in the budget. Yet this notwithstanding, a majority of those in the room actually voted to move forward without ever having seen a budget, much less read a budget, digested a budget, figured out what was in the budget and whether they liked it. And that's sort of bizarre. Now this morning, the town manager sent an email to all of the employees in town. I think it was fair to say that people were frustrated last night. Some people, including some of the selectmen, were angry last night as to the absence of the budget, and this probably is what prompted this email from the town manager. Let me read the beginning of this email. I want to apologize for the embarrassment at last night's meeting. The failure to have copies of the budget available prior to the night of the meeting rests with me. It was simply an oversight. An oversight. That's a noble sentiment, ladies and gentlemen. It just happens not to be true. As we said, I was in Town Hall last Wednesday. I asked for a copy of the budget. I was told in no uncertain terms it was not available. It would not be available. This was not an oversight. This was a policy to make sure the budget would not be available. So I would argue that apologies are indeed needed. Town manager needs to apologize to his staff for sending them an email, which is quite frankly grossly misleading. We've gone from secrets, as we discussed last week, to what looks like lies this week. And I think we, the voters, are owed an apology too, as to why we were expected to proceed in a town meeting without a budget in hand. As John said before we went on air, it was a first for him. I mean, you can't make this stuff up.
You can't make this stuff up. Only here.
The second question that consumed people was the lack of an audit. As you know, we have no audit for the year ended June 2011. As you probably also know, we have no audit for the year ended June 2012. There was no update given last night on the possible timing of the audit for June 2011. Presumably it is still months away. We were told, surprise, surprise, that the audit for June 2012 would not be done on time, and best case would be done in March. Now, up till now, every prognostication as to the timing of the audit has been off somewhere between 3 and 6 months. So if the town manager tells us now that it will be done in March, that probably means right around this time next year. Now, a lot of people found this...
I made an observation. And this was with Henry last night. And Henry and I were talking, and he had 32 years. He has 32 years in as being the only finance director for the town of Winchester. I made the comment that the the current town manager is going to be the only town manager that never produces a budget, never produces an audit, and never chairs a retirement meeting.
We should give these folks medals. We should give them the Royal Order of the lack of disclosure. I mean, this stuff is amazing. And member of the public after member of the public stood up and said, how can you expect us to vote to spend money if you won't tell us where you spent money in the past? How can this be? How can this be? Now, this led Selectman Perez to make the first of several rather startling assertions last night. She said that according to the charter, the mechanic baked into the charter, that we never have a copy of the prior year's budget. That it's just not possible based on the timing required by the charter. No, this is just complete fabrication, as someone pointed out. The way this is supposed to work is that we were supposed to vote in May on the first referendum to pass a budget, May 2012. Had our audit been completed on time, we would have, at that point, an audit for the year ended June 2011. We would have an audit in hand for the last full year. The charter is set up precisely to ensure that that happens. And for Candy to state the opposite is just misleading and nonsense. Indeed, the town meeting last night set as a date for the referendum October 27th.
Saturday, October 27th, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., Pearson School.
If our audits were completed on time, when we go to the polls on October the 27th, we would probably have not just an audit for June 2011, we'd probably have an audit for June 2012 too. Because as I said last night, we're not just one audit late, we are 2 audits late. The timing of this referendum, however, should give you access, should in an ideal world give you access to 2 full years of audited material. It will, in all practicality, give you access to none. You will go to the polls to vote on a budget without the slightest idea of where your money has actually been spent. That was the first bizarro concept that Candy came up with. The second related to this notion that we should perhaps postpone the town meeting until people had had a chance to review the budget. The grounds for such action were that if we did not postpone the meeting, people would be expected to vote without ever having seen a budget, and that is contrary both to common sense and to the charter. Now, Selectman Perez made reference to the fact that the Republicans, Selectman Albanesius and Fracasso, were all for breaking the provisions of the charter a couple of weeks ago when they argued we should postpone the budget until we have the reval information, until we have real information on how we can effectively restructure our expenses. And that they recognized that that would represent a breach of the requirements of the charter, but operating with full knowledge was simply the better option. Now, the fact of the matter is that last night's town meeting was going to break one of 2 requirements as to the charter. It was either going to break the requirement that the budget be available to the public before you vote on it, or it was going to break the requirement that the budget vote take place in a certain number of days. As we break down Candy's assertion, let's break down exactly what was being said. Fracasso and Albanesius urged that the provisions of the charter be ignored in order that we would have full information on the reval, we would have full information on the audit, and we would have the opportunity to craft something that actually makes sense to restructure our expenses. They urged breaking the provisions of the charter if necessary to get to the right answer. Candy Perez and the Democrats urged breaking the charter precisely to force you to vote on a budget that you'd never seen, precisely to force a budget to the table without the information about the reval, without the information about the audit, without the information about how to restructure our expenses. You pick, ladies and gentlemen, which way you prefer to break your charter. You want to break it in order to get the answer, to get the information, to make progress, or you want to break it to be forced to vote on something you've never actually seen. Which brings us to the second part of the town manager's email. Because what we're basically talking about here is the failure to disclose information. I quote, "Finally, a few residents continue to clamour for a preliminary report of the current revaluation. For two key reasons, I will encourage representatives of Vision Appraisal that is, and the town staff not to release such information. Town manager says he has the information, staff has the information. He's just not going to reveal it. This doesn't work, ladies and gentlemen. We need the information to make an informed decision about the budget. You need the information to make an informed decision about your household economies. You can't just say, we're not going to give it to you because it's going to make our lives politically awkward. This just doesn't work. The last thing I'll say about last night, there was a lot of comment about the lack of information from the Board of Education, and specifically the lack of year-end information from the Board of Education. As it happens, the selectmen had been provided last Thursday with year-end information from the Board of Education. It was approved by the Board of Education on September 11th. I unfortunately was not at that meeting. For some reason, the board sat on it from the 11th until the 27th and then provided it to the selectmen. This is progress, you say. Unfortunately, the report doesn't actually add up. That's right. The numbers don't actually add up. The report says that there's a surplus of $183, I believe, $1,000 that is returned to the town. Now, that may well be true, but if you add up the numbers in the report, the surplus shrinks to $113,000. Still a surplus, you say. Well, unfortunately, there is a single grant, the excess cost grant, that is unspent in the tune of $134,000, according to this report. That grant is defined by the state of Connecticut as a discretionary revenue of the town. To the extent unspent by the school board, it needs to go back to the town. Simple math says the $134,000 going back to the town is bigger than the $113,000 that the school board claims to have as surplus. If these numbers are correct, and who the hell knows, ladies and gentlemen, because most of the numbers have been wrong so far, but if these numbers are correct, the school board is not in surplus. The school board is in deficit. If these numbers are correct, the school board did not underspend, did not deliver money back to the town. The school board overspent. Now, I don't know why the school board leaves their critical faculties behind when they walk into a school board meeting. I don't understand why people with above average intelligence fail at the most basic mathematical computational skills. But the simple fact of the matter is that when they see numbers with dollar signs attached, they have an attack of hives. They go and run. They refuse to actually take the time to get it right. And so we end up with a year-end report from the schools that simply doesn't add up. That yields more questions than it answers and implies that the school board actually overspent rather than underspending. So that was our town meeting, ladies and gentlemen. Quite the meeting.
And we'll roll into part two. The incentive housing zones. Article in the newspaper on the 27th. I happened to make a copy of it. Planometrics brought an architect to sites and surprising him through their extensive knowledge of the buildings in question. They did a lot of work on our POCD, Hillman said, and for that reason they were included. Incentive housing zones allow developers within a designated area to circumvent local zoning regulations as long as they adhere to strict rules. So there's no reason to have a planning and zoning.
If you can break all the rules.
If you can break all the rules, why have it? They must set aside 20% of the units for residents who earn no more than 80% of the town's median income. Well, we pulled a little information off the web. I'll let you read this. This is the Connecticut state median income. We'll do it for a family of four.
For a family of four, the Connecticut median income is $101,000, or a shade over, 101,973.
And this is from the U.S. Census Bureau. That one was from the United Way of Connecticut, and they're right on top of it because of their grants. This is from the American Community Surveys from the U.S. Census Bureau. The median family income for the past 12 months for Winsted was
$68,406.
So we'll round it off to $70,000, and we'll take 80% of that. So we're talking about
56 grand.
56 grand. All right. So then we get down. We do more. We look at
54 grand, actually, I apologize.
Yeah. We look at the total number of housing units in town. This is also from the 2010 census. 3,828. occupied housing units, 3,346, or 87% of the total is occupied. There are 482 vacant houses, and some are for rent, some are rented not occupied, some are for sale only, sold not occupied. It varies. The occupied housing units, as I said, total 3,346 units. Owner-occupied housing units total 1,728 units, or 51.6%. Renter-occupied housing units total 1,618, or 48%. So there's a 50-50 split in units between owner-occupied already and rental.
The rentals.
When you go further under the covers and you look at all the subsidized housing, of all the housing units, 20% of them are subsidized already. I mean, most towns have it 3-4%. Now, we are launching once again on another path to put more subsidized housing in the town of Winchester and not address the most critical need that we have, which is revitalizing the neighborhoods and converting the rental units back into single-family owner-occupied housing. You don't need developers running around here without zoning regulations looking for pieces of land to develop to bring more people in that don't make any money.
This is the problem, ladies and gentlemen. We have spent the last 3 months, 4 months talking about the reval. And as you recall, the core issue with the reval is the collapse of value of the downtown neighborhoods. A collapse in value that is caused by a number of features, but one of the causes of it is itself. As values drop, that further drives more values down. You get foreclosures, empty buildings, squatters, that drives buildings down further, drives values down further. So as John says, we are now embarking on a program to accelerate that process. We should be embarking on a process to reverse that process. Now, one of the confusing things here is people have started referring to both of these programs as incentive programs. So let's just take a stop right now. We have talked about neighborhood revitalization. That is a program that is currently in this draft budget at $20,000. To be effective, it needs to be in for at least $200,000. That is the program by which we give tax incentives to convert multifamily rental properties into single-family owner-occupied properties.
And we incent the owner-occupier to do that.
By giving them a tax break over many years. The purpose of that is A, to stop the decline in value, B, to reverse that and create an upside in value, and C, to get people on the street with disposable income and the interest in our community to begin to support a Main Street. This incentive program, by contrast, is precisely the reverse. It is to take properties and actually increase the degree of subsidized housing, or cheap housing. As John says, the average community the average of communities in Connecticut are probably at 2 to 3% of units in subsidized housing. We're at 20. The federal requirement is 12. We are so far beyond where we need to be to meet the law that we have unbalanced our community.
And, okay, that is the other program in the budget for $20,000?
Right.
Okay. Now, I'm not voting for this budget just because that $20,000 is in there. I mean, I will not vote yes on any budget that puts forward any more housing that is subsidized. You don't need it, you don't want it, and it's time that the people at the lake in Winchester really look at whether they want to be part of the town of Winchester anymore. I mean, you're just throwing more money down a hole.
Right. I mean, this is not just something that's not a good idea. This is a terrible idea. This is basically taking the reval and saying, we want to put steroids on the reval. We want to really crush the values in downtown. We want to really crush the prospects of any retail operation, any commercial operation in our town to attract customers, local customers with disposable income. We want to take every possible housing opportunity and turn it into low-income housing.
And let me give you the flip side. I mean, you still have big tracts of land just up the lake, okay? They didn't want the housing development that actually brought in people with money. That could be a housing development for people without money. You didn't want the development on Wallens Hill at the old at the farm there that...
Yep. The Ridge at Wallens Hill.
Ridge at Wallens Hill, okay. That can be taken over by one of these developers. They don't have to follow any of your zoning, and they can build something that puts more subsidized housing in place. I mean, what are we thinking about here, folks?
Yeah, I mean, the only silver lining here, and it's a very, very slim silver lining, is that this program is only available to specific properties as identified by P&Z and accepted by the state. Now, unfortunately, P&Z has gone back into the secrets business as an out-of-the-disclosure business. For this entire year, there are only 2 sets of minutes posted to the website that relate to the activities of P&Z. One meeting in January, one meeting in June. Nothing else. Everything else apparently is secret. So we don't know what buildings, what portions of town, what streets, what blocks, what neighborhoods they have selected for this program. But it's very much at their discretion.
Now let's give the flip side. I can bet you the Capital Products building is part of this. How much more of this stuff do you want to put on your downtown?
Right.
And do you think Selectman Ronzullo, who through his I would say he has a limited liability corporation, but I can't say for sure, takes this unit and puts more subsidized housing downtown? I mean, what? Knock the buildings down. Right. I mean, the town, the town and the boards should come to consensus that these buildings are not going forward to do anything, and it's time to knock them down. It would behoove everyone to just spend the money, knock the buildings down, get them off the tax rolls, and move on. Put the investment into the community. And this is the community that has been here for years and years and years, has paid taxes, and needs help.
And this is part of the pattern, ladies and gentlemen. The pattern of the last several, certainly the last several months, probably really the last several years, is a pattern where decisions are made behind closed doors. They are not disclosed to you and to us. Those decisions reflect almost universally poor judgment. Those decisions reflect a seeming writing off of downtown as a problem that is just too difficult to solve. This is bullcrap, ladies and gentlemen. Pardon my expression, but this problem needs to be solved. We've got to fix the downtown. The way to fix the downtown is not to fill it with more affordable housing. It is to provide the tax incentives to bring real development in, individual development and larger development. The way we do that is by sensible policies, by full disclosure, by creating policies that people understand, and by creating transparency.
I mean, my God, West Hartford creates Blueback Square. They go vote on it, they approve it, they build it, it's there. Winston is going to do incentive housing? My God, I mean, you don't need any more incentive for incentive housing. The prices are low enough.
That's why we can't have meetings like we had last night. We can't have meetings where you're asked to vote on things that you can't see. We can't have meetings where commissions are doing things that they don't talk about. We can't have administrations that just don't tell you what they're up to with your money. We need audits, we need budgets, we need transparency, we need follow-through, and we need some people with decent ideas to step up to the plate, and you, the voters, to hold them accountable. That's what we need, ladies and gentlemen. That's what the next several shows will talk about in the context of the budget.
Okay, remember, town meeting, Saturday, or excuse me, referendum date, Saturday, 27th of October. Vote and vote no.
If you want absentee ballots, call up the town clerk right now. Start now. We've had problems each and every referendum trying to get these absentee ballots out. You have to make the call now. And this budget has no solutions for Winstead. It just makes things worse. No more secrets, ladies and gentlemen. No more lies. We need transparency, progress, judgment, revitalization of our downtown. Thank you very much. We will see you next week.
Good night.